Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world. Welcome to Splendid Isolation number 91. And this evening we have a special Splendid Isolation. The first bit, I still can't find a way of stopping that happening. Sorry, guys. But anyway, welcome to Splendid Isolation number 91. And this evening we've got a special stream. We're going to be talking about Putin's speech to start with for the first hour probably, and the second hour is going to be mainly about Northern Ireland. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune, and this one I really like.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new gods, sullen peoples, have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror, and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that Eden folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your giving, and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden, and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor, are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian guys? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom, to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly crafted laurel, the easy young grudge praise. Comes out to search our manhood through all of thankless years. No age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
Okay, that was the White Man's Burden, sung by the excellent Australian singer and musician Chris Gard. Please go and subscribe to his channel. It's excellent. It's got some great stuff on there. And of course, that is a poem by Rudyard Kipling set to music. Okay, ladies and gents, how are we going this evening? Mitch, how are you going, mate?
Doing the same as usual. I imagine it'll be. I imagine like first topic being Putin's speech will be interesting, and I don't know too much about Northern Ireland though, as of late.
Well, that's why we've got Lady of Shalott on, who is a lady from Ulster. Lady of Shalott, how are you going?
I'm really good, really good. Nice to see that it's daylight already in Australia. It's really nice that we're not in the dark. We're not in the dark.
Yeah, the clocks went forward. We lost an hour in Australia yesterday evening. Richard, how are you going, mate?
Very well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be amongst this esteemed panel tonight.
And last, but by no means least, Arman, how are you going, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Oh yeah, I'm always getting along, you know. Okay. Well, look, this stream is going to be divided into two halves, pretty much. The first half of the stream, Richard in particular, is going to be looking at Putin's speech, and Mitch is a Russian speaker, and so he's our kind of resident Russian expert. And then the second half of the stream, after about the first hour, is mainly going to be about Northern Ireland, and that's why we've got Lady of Shalott on this evening. So I'm going to hand it over to Richard to start off about Putin's speech.
Okay, I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't expect that. Didn't expect you to hand it off to me. Well, it's not just the speech, but it's also the events that surround the mysterious explosion and disintegration of Nord Streams 1 and 2, which I think we would be remiss if we didn't discuss that as well.
Well, look, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Richard, that was either the United States Navy with a submarine, probably, and some SEAL Special Forces divers, or just conceivably it could have been a Royal Navy submarine with some SBS Special Forces divers. They would also totally be able to do that fairly easily. But right. It was one of those two, and likely it was the United States Navy.
Right.
Well, there's no reason for Russia to do it. They can just turn the tap off. They don't need to blow their own pipeline up.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I mean, there is no evidence to suggest either way who did it. But if you just narrow down based on who benefits, and who has the technical capabilities to do that.
I mean, look, Russia could do it. Don't get me wrong, but the point is, Russia absolutely has the technical ability to do that. But the Baltic is basically a NATO lake, and Russian submarines in the Baltic, and there are not many because they couldn't get out, are very, very closely monitored by NATO warships and submarines. So it wasn't the Russians. I absolutely would lay all the money I have in the world, which is not a huge amount, all of it, I would lay on it wasn't the Russians that did that.
Yeah, not to mention where Nord Stream got struck, nearby in Danish island by the name of Bornholm, where there was a NATO base, and we're trying underwater drones there, coincidentally.
Yeah, there was a US warship just in that area like a week before. For God's sake. I mean, how stupid do they think people are? I mean, all right, I know there's a lot of stupid people in the world, sadly, but, you know, how stupid?
I mean, we expect you to believe that Russian soldiers dug trenches in Chernobyl and that they were bombing a nuclear power plant, which is under their control.
Yeah, with their own soldiers next to it and their own nuclear monitoring force next to it. Yeah.
I mean, but Biden was asked what he was going to do about this pipeline about a week ago, and he, in his senile way, gave this smirk and said, "Oh, we have ways." I mean, he's such a senile walking vegetable that.
Yeah, I'm not sure when it was, but you're right.
Yeah. January. I think it was from January or February.
Yeah, they can't help themselves but to give themselves away.
Yeah, Victoria Nuland also said the same, which, if anyone knows anything about Victoria Nuland, you could say she is part to blame for war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just to inform people who don't know, Victoria Nuland is part of the Anglo-Saxon cabal that runs America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
But
I just point
also-
out as well that Israel is apparently preparing to sell gas to Europe, but they weren't going to be ready till September. They said back in sort of February.
Yes,
That's convenient.
That's handy.
I would also point out that that Britain is getting a huge cloud of methane gas over it now from these leaks, and Greta Thunberg is nowhere to be seen. Surprisingly enough.
Yeah, I also had a look at the Green Party social media feeds, and on the day that this happened, they were talking about abortions, and they haven't literally said a thing about it anywhere.
Yeah, so no one's going to go and glue themselves to the pipeline then, I suppose.
Like, an ecological disaster happens literally in their backyard essentially, and they don't care.
Yeah, it is quite strange. Look, as far as I'm concerned, that was the American Navy, or like as I said, an outside chance it was the Royal Navy done at American request. But it wasn't anyone else.
But it's Duke. It reminds me of that Kissinger quote that's sort of doing the rounds, and I'm not sure if it's true or not. And I'll have to paraphrase, but it goes something like, to be an enemy of America is deadly, but to be a friend is fatal. And I mean, how else? I mean, I made quite a controversial statement in your chat, and I said that, from my point of view, I don't really see the difference between bombing or taking offline the Nord Stream 1 and 2, and how that's kind of different from basically area bombing Germany during the war, because it's in many ways it's kind of the same thing. It's
related.
Like it's an attack on civilians.
It's related for sure. I mean, look, the thing that you've got to look at, I mean, it's quo bono, it's who benefits, right? There is now no chance, literally no chance, of Germany turning around and saying, "Oh, bugger this sanctions shit, we're going to get back we're going to talk to Russia again." They literally cannot do that now.
Yeah, it was literally the one thing that could have brought both parties, effectively Europe and Russia, back to the table to sort of negotiate some kind of beneficial outcome for everybody. But now that that's off the table, I mean, from a Russian point of view, what have they got to lose? Nothing.
Yeah,
really.
and as Mitch pointed out in the chat, Andrew Lennox, he's talking to someone in the chat here, and he says Zelensky refuses to negotiate with Putin over the Donbass and the other oblasts, and Putin won't budge. So no time soon unless one side loses. In other words, there isn't going to be a peace deal. Yeah. And that's another reason why I believe this pipeline was blown up. So there is no chance of a peace deal.
Yeah. So you've got the four oblasts which voted for Russia, but Ukrainians won't budge on those, and Ukraine's also saying they won't negotiate while Putin's in charge. But the thing is, if you get rid of him, it'll be someone even more extreme compared to him. Like Putin's like
he's got a lot of criticism, hasn't he, Mitch? Inside Russia, people think he's not being tough enough.
Yeah, you got Shrelkov, who's just like, he wants to nuke half of Ukraine. You got Kadyrov, who wants to nuke half of Ukraine and take the other half to become like second Chechnya, basically. Then you've got a guy called Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is I don't know how familiar people are with the Wagner PMC, but like they're like elite Russian group who they're mercenaries, but they always like fight on Russia's side.
Mitch, for people in the chat, the Wagner group are pretty much the same as like a lot of these private contractor mercenary companies that America and Britain uses all the time. But they're the Russian version of that. Yeah,
and they're they are like pretty elite here, and it's not just that Putin always sends them to fight. Let's say, for example, you've got an African Republic that Putin sees an opportunity to influence. He'll send Wagner over to help them with like rebellions or whatever.
Yeah, like I said, exactly the same as some of these groups that employ ex-special forces dudes and ex-parachute regiment dudes and ex-marines that the Americans and the Brits use frequently. As Andrew Lennox in the chat says, Blackwater mercenaries, those sort of guys. And Wagner is just the Russian equivalent of that. They're exactly pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got a guy called Dmitry Medvedev who, so he was president from 2008 to 2012, and he was tipped to be basically like quite liberal compared to Putin, but then nowadays he's like completely like he's borderline Fed posting about the Western Ukraine, so he's pretty like hardcore, especially compared to Putin these days. In contrast, like 10 years ago when he was seen as soft compared to Putin 10 years ago.
Andrew Lennox says that the Wagner Group is named after Hitler's favorite composer. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Western equivalent. The Ukrainians have got their own PMC called Mozart.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Musical mercenaries, eh? All right then.
Yeah.
All right then. Fair enough. But I mean, like I said, the Russians using these dudes is really no different. Like there are a lot of private security companies in the US and also in UK, and they employ people like ex-SAS guys, ex-parachute regiment, ex-Royal Marine commandos, these sorts of people. And the Russians are not doing anything that the West doesn't do in that sense.
No, it's just it's a case of like just Western hypocrisy in that one.
For sure. So yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I don't think any of us are going to disagree that the most likely people to have blown up the Nord Stream pipelines in 4 places we now hear, 2 pipelines in 4 places, so there's no accident. It was almost certainly it was a Western nation, let's say, but it was probably the Americans, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for certain, but I look at it and just think to myself that, I mean, there really is nothing that either Germany or Russia gains from bombing that pipeline themselves. They financed it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They have a financial stake in its future.
Absolutely.
The idea that Russia bombed their own infrastructure and they now have a stranded asset in the Yamal Peninsula that is going to lose $50 billion worth of revenue each year, and was leverage over Germany and the rest of Europe. The idea that they would just trash that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Absolutely.
I say, from a technical point of view, I don't see who else could do it other than the United States.
Yeah, the Ukrainians have no ability to do that sort of thing in the Baltic Sea, none at all. And I would rather doubt that the Polish Navy has the ability to do it, who are the only other people who might have. And I really would rather doubt that the Polish have the ability to do that, and particularly to do it without being spotted by the Danes or the Swedes.
And even if it was the Poles that pulled it off, they would still have to have the blessing of Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if the Brits did it, it wouldn't have been off the Brits' own back. It would have been because Washington asked them to.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's no way dimwit Truss would have thought, oh, this is a great idea, I'll tell the Royal Navy to do that, and wouldn't have said anything to fucking senile Biden. But,
Well, think about it. Even from a UK point of view, how is taking offline Nord Stream 1 and 2 actually good for the UK? Because don't forget that because Europe's not buying gas from Russia now, they're bidding up the price of LNG, which the UK itself is dependent on. So even from that point of view, it makes no...
And am I right, Richard, that the UK is the place that has all the ports that this stuff has to come into via ships, and then we send it to Europe?
Well, that's part of the mix. So it's the Milford. I think it's Milford Haven in west on the west coast of Wales. There's an LNG terminal, but the Germans are acting very rapidly to build temporary floating regasification facilities.
That's going to take them a fair while to get really working.
Oh, for the next 4 years, Europe's kind of buggered with the LNG situation.
I mean, I keep hearing people saying, "Oh, Europe's got enough gas." Europe might have enough gas if we have a very mild winter. Maybe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a Bank of America projection that came out a couple of days ago that says that if Nord Stream 1 and 2 is offline and the that currently flows from Ukraine is offline as well, then the continent as a whole will run out by the end of March 2023.
Yeah.
But if it's a mild winter or a warm winter, then we should be okay. So again, it's very much dependent on the weather.
Well, from our point of view on the dissident right, let's hope we have a very hard winter. That's what I hope.
I'm just going to point out the temperature's gone south pretty quick this last week.
Yeah, that's what my family are saying. It's already getting really, really cold in the evening.
I've got my heating on right now.
Everyone is telling me this, and you, Richard, are actually like further south than the UK, yeah.
Yeah, but don't forget, I'm at 1,500 meters above sea level.
But you're a long way south of England.
That is true, but also here in Andorra we use gas oil, so it's diesel. So I'm okay. I'm okay this winter.
Oh yeah, no, look, I'm sure you'll be okay, and I'm even UK will probably get away with it. But like UK has much milder winters than Germany does, because we have the Gulf Stream and an Atlantic climate. Germany doesn't. Like German winters are normally like considerably colder and harder than the UK winters.
Yeah, so it's as we'd say, it's in the hands of the gods right now, really.
Yeah.
All right, military theorist here says, "Wow, really nice wishing for old ladies to freeze to death." I'm not wishing for that, military theorist. I'm wishing for a change in our government, which overall will save many more old ladies. I'm rather fond of old ladies, actually. I like them. I have my neighbours are both little old ladies.
I'm not sure that I actually agree with what you just said anymore, Duke, because I would say that if Nord Stream 1 and 2 were still operational, then I would support that position, because there would be the possibility that we would negotiate an agreement with Russia and go back to where we were. But now that there literally is no alternative to that gas supply, I mean, I think we have to just have a default position that we hope for a mild winter. I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm an accelerationist on this, mate. These things need to go bad.
Right, but it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna say it.
No, please, Armand. Look, I don't censor guys like you and Richard on this channel at all.
I'm just not sure if I want to get into the argument, but usually tough times actually make the incumbent power stronger, not weaker. Simple
Pirate in the chat says, "I want chaos." Yes, I do. You're right. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Look, really, I certainly don't want dead old ladies. What I want is like our culturally enriched societies with all that diversity, for the diversity to show its true colours this winter. So that's really what I'm hoping. But we'll see. Anyway, like before this stream started, big discussions in the Discord, and Richard convinced me to make the first half of this about Putin's speech. So I'm still waiting for Richard to start the thing about Putin's speech.
Okay,
please.
Well, sure. Okay, so I mean, a number of things. So, I mean, my sort of overall impression is that this speech is a kind of wrap up. So I think I've got a gut feeling that I believe the Russian activities in Ukraine are coming to an end. So you have to remember.
Before you go on any further, let me say I totally disagree with that. And partly because I don't think the Ukrainians will allow that, or the West will allow that. And I think this goes back to the pipeline stuff we were just talking about.
Okay, fair enough. But so, I mean, the context of this, so this speech was actually, I mean, I'm looking at the Kremlin website for the official translation. And the speech was actually given on the topic of the signing of the treaties on the accession of Donetsk, Lugansk People's Republic, and the other one that I simply can't pronounce, and Kherson regions to Russia. So that was right. So that was the backdrop of the speech. So it begins with, oh, it's great to have these ethnic Russians back in the Federation, blah, blah, blah. And then, my impression is, I think I asked myself, well, who is this speech aimed at? And it's aimed at a number of people. One, the domestic audience. Two, Russia's sort of nominal allies, third world. And then essentially well, really those two audiences, really, because I don't believe that much of this. Well, some of this is aimed at Europe, because it does go to great pains to basically say, hey, you in Europe, you're vassal states of America, which is true, not just Europe, but South Korea and Japan. So there's a number of aspects that we can break this down into, and I know that there's a few points that you don't agree with, Duke. Do you want to go into those, what you don't agree with? Duke?
Sorry, I was muted. I think much of the first half of Putin's speech was aimed at his allies in the Chinese Communist Party. So
there's only two references to China in the whole speech.
Yeah, but some of it was aimed at them nonetheless. Like a lot of the stuff when he was going on about colonialism and opium wars and all this kind of stuff, all bullshit. So was the stuff about bombing German seas, because we have to remember that Comrade Stalin was the guy who wanted it was Dresden, for example, was bombed at Stalin's request.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you correctly pointed out, that Bowden pointed that out in a speech. So, you know,
well, hang on a minute.
All of that.
Why don't we break this into two components? So, do you want to address the part about the your opposition to the point about the opium wars? What's
all right?
Look,
my big criticism of much of what's been going on over Ukraine for the most of this year has been that we have driven Russia into the arms of China, like the West has driven Russia into the arms of China, when Russia does not need to be an enemy of the West. And it certainly doesn't need to be an enemy of Britain in particular, because Britain is basically an island maritime nation and Russia's a big-time land power. And we've driven them into the arms of the Chinese Communist Party through sheer moronic nonsense from basically the Western leaders, but mostly, of course, the Americans.
Yeah, but hang on a minute. What part of the speech don't you agree with? So I understand that, yes.
Well, look, Atman has spoken about this as well as me. The opium wars were not the opium wars. They weren't about opium.
Yeah, they were named the Opium Wars much later for a start.
Yes, they were.
I don't know what said in the speech about the Opium Wars.
Let me quickly read that then. So I'll just read the paragraph. So it begins. It is worth reminding the West that it began its colonial policy back in the Middle Ages, followed by the worldwide slave trade, the genocide of Indian tribes in America, the plunder of India and Africa, the wars of England and France against China, as a result of which it was forced to open its ports to the opium trade. What they did was to get entire nations hooked on drugs and purposefully exterminated entire ethnic groups for the sake of grabbing land and resources, hunting people like animals. This is contrary to human nature, truth, freedom, and justice.
All right. Look, what you've got to say about that is at the same time as the Western nations were supposedly doing something like that, which is not absolutely true, but even if you take it as being true, Russia was doing exactly the same thing in the Caucasus and then in Central Asia. And if you look at it, you'll find that Delhi is no longer a city controlled by the British, whereas if you look at Samarkand, for example, that's a city still controlled by Russia.
Who's he trying to appeal to with that, do we think?
Well, look, it's like Dostastic Draco said in the chat. All of that anti-colonial stuff was aimed at India, Africa, and Western Marxists. He says including some Dugin lovers, which is probably true. But it was also mainly aimed at the Chinese Communist Party, which comes out with that shit constantly. But like I said, the West drove Putin and the Russians into the arms of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the most huge world strategic error I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, of course, and the Chinese have just abstained from a vote against Russia at the United Nations about their four referendums. So the Chinese they always stick in for them. You have to say that for them.
Yeah, Brazil and India also did the same. So
Yeah,
looks like
Yeah.
the BRICS are consolidating behind Putin.
Yeah. And that is what, and that Richard, was who that speech, that part of the speech was aimed at, for 100% true. And it was mostly bullshit, I have to say. I'm sorry, the first half of his speech was crap. Like, people have often called me a Putin shill, and I'm not. I prefer Russia to Ukraine because all my enemies support Ukraine. But if real British forces were involved in fighting the Russians, you would not find me a Russian shill.
Well, right, but it's like Cool Chickens just said in the chat. All of that speech just sounds like our media, and it does. You know, there'll be a lot of people who are outside of the immediate elite who make up, you know, parts of the media superstructure and such, who are going to be scratching their head at that because they're going to think, hang on a minute, that's our criticism. That's what we say.
Yeah, look, like I said, I don't think all of that speech is like our media. I think the second half of Putin's speech was very much stronger than the first half.
Well, just listen to this dog shit. Just listen to this. While we are proud that in the 20th century our country led the anti-colonial movement, which opened up opportunities for many people around the world to make progress, reduce poverty and inequality, and defeat hunger and disease.
Well, all right, I've got to say something there, Richard. Like, I served in the SADF in the 1980s in Southwest Africa, and yeah, I saw some of the results of that, where there were Russian and East German advisors and actual Cuban troops, all communist bastards. And I saw some of the villages they helped wipe out, and they killed every man, woman, and child in the place. So again,
Is this
that bit was crap.
Is this where you had Mandela hugging Castro on a stage, saying he's a friend to Africa, whilst Cuban troops were taking both aids back to Cuba and were putting down like actual revolutionaries in Ethiopia?
Well, yeah, and in Southwest Africa, they were absolutely butchering every man, woman, and child in some villages that were pro-South Africa. So, yeah, exactly. All of that. The Soviets were evil. Yeah, Simple Pirate in the chat, I don't like the Soviets at all. So whenever Putin goes on about the Soviets, I'm sorry, he loses me. I got nothing against Russians. But the Soviets? The Soviet Communist Party? Nah, sorry.
With Putin, with Russians, they'll have like a pick and mix opinion of the Soviet Union. Like, on one hand, they blame the Soviet Union for example, for bringing lots of Russians into the neighboring states of Russia, such as Kazakhstan or Ukraine or whatever, and then leaving them stranded after they collapsed. So, for example, Crimea was given to Ukraine by Khrushchev, even though the Crimean people identify more with Russia. Yeah. And then you got a city called in northern Kazakhstan called Pavlodar, which is pretty much entirely Russian. There's no Kazakhs living there, but it's on the Kazakh side of the border. So
it's kind of like how Stalin's still quite popular over there. You know, they see it as a sort of imperial venture. They see, in a sort of primal sense, they see the strength that came out from it.
Yeah,
do you know what? I was just going to say, it's a bit like, you know, the Brits still like Churchill, and like Churchill did more harm to Britain than like any other British leader since fuck me, Dad. Churchill did more harm to Britain than any British leader ever, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's going to be a national mythos in Russia, and there's going to be one in Britain, and it's always going to lionize the sort of the main players in, you know, pivotal events in history, regardless of whether they were good or not.
It's funny as well, because at the time of Stalin, that the founding myth was Lenin, and he sort of built up Lenin's image. And then after Stalin went, everyone just built up Stalin's image after that. So
yeah, and of course these days with Russians, what you have is Putin tries to go back to like Peter the Great and Catherine the Great and all these great Russian leaders in the past, and I understand that. But to me, where I can't agree with him is when he like appeals to the Soviet Union. Sorry, just can't.
I mean, as I said. Look, you'll get loads of Russians who on one hand look at it with nostalgia because, you know, it was a time when Russia was strong, it had mighty armed forces, you didn't have the corruption that came after the Soviet Union. Well, Soviet Union was corrupt, but when it comes to like corruption, like when you ask a Russian about corruption, they'll think about Yeltsin and the people around him. But anyway, so that's the overall point.
But it seems to me that if you're trying to build a strong state with some sort of historical legacy, it seems to me to be imperative that you want to build a sort of broad tent movement. And if you're going to build a broad tent movement, what you can't do is go around saying, well, this part of history was shit. You've got to incorporate basically everything in some way if you can. Otherwise, you're just going to alienate large sections and constituencies of your population. It's kind of like this speech. I mean, this speech is kind of all over the place, but there's something in here for everyone. And I find in particular, I think his analysis and deconstruction of American power is very accurate. And I can see in here that he's trying to signal to the vassal states that, you can get out from underneath this sort of tyrannical system. I mean, that's part of this speech, but it's something that's trying to appeal to many different constituencies.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know if you listen to RT back in the day, but like one thing you notice about Russian propaganda, whatever you want to call it, is that they target both sides of the spectrum. Like they'll target left wingers, like tankies and whatever, with like the anti-colonial rhetoric, like, oh, look at us Russians, we're fighting against a racist colonial West. But then they'll hook the right wingers in by talking about the transgenders and that sort of stuff, and traditional family. So they fulfill both sides with like what they say. That's why you got Putin, for example. He'll get the third world to love him because he'll say about the racist colonial West, but then he'll also get right wingers here in the West simping for him as well by talking about the transgenders and decline of a traditional family and just some of the more socially degenerate stuff in the West that no Russian would ever stand for.
There's actually a feeling of it sort of, to me, very sort of focus groups, really. That, you need to appeal to this constituency, and then for this particular constituency, you need to talk about this. It's actually very inauthentic in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's incoherent to be talking about, there's good points to Stalin and there's good points to Catherine the Great. I think that if you're going to have a strong narrative, you would just have to have, like, this is the one strong narrative, and you've got your criticisms of Stalin and the Soviet Union, and that's that. But it just feels like it's been very focus grouped.
Yeah, it was like a checklist. So, right, we've talked about this. Tick. Next one. Tick. Yeah.
Look, my view on this is, and how I do it, excuse me, how I do it is like, I have no room for Winston Churchill, as most people will know on here. I think Winston Churchill did more to destroy the British Empire than any other man, including Adolf Hitler. But I have every sympathy with the very brave British officers and men who fought in World War II. I've got no problem with those guys. They were doing their duty as they saw it. They were patriots. They were not the left-wing people that some distant right people try and pretend they were. They certainly weren't fighting for LGBTQ rights or mass immigration. They weren't at all. Most of them would have been considered racist today. Like, I'm talking about the British, Canadian, Australian, and even the Americans who fought in World War II. And this is how you deal with that stuff. What you don't do, and what Putin did do, was go on about the governments. But then, as I said, I think that was almost totally aimed at the Chinese and the Indians, etc.
Yeah, it's also like, I mean, I think like we've already talked about the hypocrisy, but it's like you get on one hand, he'll say about, oh, the West genocided Native Americans, and you start by thinking, okay, well, I mean, look up what the Cossacks did to the likes of the Yakuts and the Chukchi people and all manner of peoples in Siberia. Like, the Cossacks were there.
And what the Russian communist state, the Soviet Union, did to the Cossacks, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I don't the Cossacks are a bit like both sides like hated each other because both sides like killed each other. So, but like in the case of like the Cossacks, what they did to Siberia is, they would go like because the fur trade was very profitable in Russia at that time. So we'd go into areas like Yakutia in the Russian Far East and go for furs there. But they didn't want to compete with the Yakuts, so they'd go into the Yakut areas and just like massacre entire villages to the point where like it was something like, because of the Cossacks and because of European diseases, like 80% of Siberia was depopulated, for example. So it is quite hypocritical when Russians talk about the racist colonial West in what they did to like the likes of the Cherokee or whatever, but then they ignore what they did to the Yakuts or the Chechens or the Circassians or whatever.
Okay, well, look, this has gone exactly the way I knew it would go because we're all truthful men. And great, we've given loads of aid and comfort to the neo-conservatives and the libs and all of the corporate globalists. So great, but then I knew this would happen if we discussed this. So because none of us are
What do you mean?
I just think that most of our conversation over the last half an hour has done our side of things no good whatsoever. It's just helping our enemies. But I said this.
I still don't follow how that's true.
Because when we point out the inconsistencies in Putin's speech, when we come to the true parts of it, which I hope we're going to get onto next, people will say, well, if those bits were wrong, why maybe these bits are wrong too. Because you know how many morals there are in the world, Richard?
Well, first things first, I mean, I'm not here to run cover for Russia or Ukraine. I mean, I will state here and now that I don't give a fuck about either of these states, really.
No, nor do I. But I prefer.
I'm interested
the reason I don't like Ukraine is all my enemies support them. All of my enemies support them. Every single one.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, I'm trying to read the tea leaves of the future and see if there's anything that I can tease out of this text that gives me an idea of where things are going in the future.
How very liberal of you, Richard.
I'm not sure there's really anything inherently liberal about trying to uncover truth and reason from a published text. But if that's how you feel, okay, fair enough.
No, look, mate, honestly, I hear the liberals coming out with, the blessed truth and all this stuff. And the left doesn't give a shit about the truth, nor do the corporate globalists. But apparently we're supposed to. So, okay. I might actually be a little bit more sophisticated than you think I am, Richard, in terms of propaganda, because I kind of understand what it is.
Duke, you've got 24 people watching this stream, and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So I don't really think that.
Yeah, I got 24 people watching this stream, and by the time 2 weeks have gone by, it'll be about 700. But yeah, all right, fair enough.
But the point is to not. I mean, we're not. This channel is not a propaganda outlet. We're here to discuss.
No, this channel is not a propaganda outlet. No, it's not a propaganda outlet. But you know what? It also is not. It's not here to give aid and comfort to people I despise and would absolutely prefer not to breathe.
I don't think there's any worry of that.
Yeah, I
think you've got a bit of a black-pilled view of the stream, Duke, because although we can pick out these inconsistencies, I can understand why we can see them as inconsistencies, but there's a need to do it because, as I say, there's a broad church and kind of real politics demands that you kind of, you talk to your individual constituencies that are important to you. So from Russia's point of view, and they make it very clear in this document or in this speech that, I mean, Putin's very cognizant of the fact that the role of the technological dominance of the US and the role of the US dollar is really one of the sort of key planks of their strength. And he's trying to build a coalition of countries to break that system. But in order to do that, you've got to break the back of the dollar, and you've got to sort of appeal to many different constituencies. You've got to appeal to China, you've got to appeal to the BRICS countries, you've got to appeal to the developing world to essentially drop the dollar and to fuck off these sanctions. So you've got to speak to them in a language that appeals to them, and to, like I say, I feel like the speech has been kind of focus groups in a way, but I can see why it goes in the structure that it does. It appeals to a domestic audience, it appeals to a religious audience, it appeals to the third world, and it appeals to the rival hegemon, which is China. So I'm not sure that I would say that this is giving sort of ammunition to the enemies.
No. I've even seen one or two in the chat who've been saying that it has, but okay. But you despise the chat anyway, Richard, so it doesn't matter. But look, fine. Let's move on to the second half of Putin's speech, which was like the bit where he actually told the truth. Shall we?
What to do with like how satanic the West is and whatnot.
Yeah, well, basically, the second half of Putin's speech was about how the Western elites work against their own people, which was absolutely 100% true.
Yeah, that's one thing. I've like, you see, I don't know if anyone remembers that channel called Russia Insight. It got banned after the invasion started, but in that channel, the whole point of it was, Russians don't hate the West. We actually quite like, the average Western citizen, it's the governments we hate. We hate the likes of Biden, Bush, Blair, David Cameron, whatever. Or Liz Trotsky, as Telegram likes to call her these days.
Good.
Yeah, and Ursula von der Leyen and Victoria Nuland and all these sorts. And it's just, you look at what Putin says. And there's a speech he made in Munich back in 2007, I think, where he pretty much, again, he just stated how the West has just been trying to puppet Russia and exploit it, because the West cannot abide by a strong Russia, because Russia is one of the few countries in the world that can actually resist global harm. It's actually resource rich, and it's one of the few countries where if they felt they had the will to do so, they could actually practice around sovereignty.
Either you, Mitch, or Richard, can you find the bit of the speech where he talks about the Western elite leadership being against their own people and being literally satanic in the way they expose small children to LGBT propaganda?
I've got it here. I mean, you're missing huge swathes of this speech. So the first half of the second
I watched it live, but I picked out the bits that were important.
All right, calm down. Bloody hell. I'm just saying that the first half of the second half is actually, to my mind, really good. It's a fantastic critique of American power. It goes to great lengths to essentially say that the European countries are impoverishing their own citizens. And that they can't print energy and food. And then, yes, we will get on to the last half of the final half of the speech, which focuses on the elites that you refer to. So I've got it here, I think. So this paragraph here, I think this is it. Let me repeat that the dictatorship of the Western elites targets all societies, including the citizens of Western countries themselves. This is a challenge to all. This complete renunciation of what it means to be human, the overthrow of faith and traditional values, and the suppression of freedom are coming to resemble a religion in reverse, pure Satanism. Exposing false messiahs, Jesus Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount, quote, "By their fruits ye shall know them." These poisonous fruits are already obvious to people, and not only in our country, but also in countries, in all countries, including many people in the West itself. So that's only, true, but I actually think that's more aimed towards a religious audience in his own domestic market more than anything else. But that doesn't negate the fact that what's said there is true.
And then he moved on to talk about the attacks on Western families.
Well, that's actually the paragraph before. But yes, it says, but also, do we want to have here in our country in Russia, parent number 1, parent number 2, and parent number 3? They have completely lost it instead of mother and father. Do we want our schools to impose on our children from the earliest days in school perversions that lead to degradation and extinction? Do we want to drum into their heads the ideas that certain other genders exist along with women and men, and to offer them gender reassignment surgery?
See,
Is that what we
based-
want for our country and our children? This is all unacceptable to us. We have a different future of our own.
That is based, and to me, that was the major part of the speech that I really, really liked, because it's entirely 100%, no lie whatsoever, totally true. Does anyone on this panel disagree with that? That is not true of what the West is doing today?
No. Then they wouldn't be here if they did. So
Exactly. So does anyone on this panel not agree that that is exactly what we are doing today?
Well, you know the answer to that question, though. It's just like, why are you sort of like browbeating the panel about something that we all obviously agree with?
Because I don't know why we had to do the first half of this and what we gained from it.
Because I think it's actually instructive to understand what was said throughout the entire speech, not just the parts that you agree with.
Well, I've just put the entire speech in the chat, right? So there you go. But yeah,
is this not the speech where he mentions Anglo-Saxons? What's the context?
Yeah, he did mention Anglo-Saxons, and do you know what we got in a Discord I'm a member of, which is not my own Discord? What we got is people referencing William the Bastard and how wonderful he was.
Got the quote here about the Anglo-Saxons. So it goes, but the Anglo-Saxons, so also the Yanks, believe sanctions are no longer enough and never turn to subversion, causing explosions on Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea, destroying Europe's entire energy infrastructure. And essentially it goes on about how the likes of AUKUS and NATO are there to corral everyone who doesn't agree with them, like with the Anglosphere.
Yeah, when Putin talks about the Anglo-Saxons, he meant the Anglosphere, of course he did.
Yeah, I mean, you get some people on Telegram and Twitter who like memed it. So like, I even posted one meme in the Discord server. But yeah, it was like, because that's the thing is outside, like in countries like France and Germany, well, not Germany, in France and Russia, for example, they'll call us Anglo-Saxons because unlike unlike historians the past 60 years in the UK, most people in the world actually know, us Anglos are actually Anglo-Saxon.
I had, sorry to interrupt you, Mitch, I had an argument with a bloke on another Discord, a friend of mine, by the way, who's been on this stream many times, who actually turned around and said it doesn't matter, that there was no difference between the Anglo-Saxons taking over most of England and current mass immigration. Made no difference. And this bloke I have always assumed him to be a sensible conservative, but he actually said that, which is an entirely leftist argument to me.
Who was it?
I'm not going to name it. Sorry.
Okay.
It was Colin Lindell, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Colin Liddell. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if Colin Liddell did that these days, but it wasn't. No.
Well, I'm going to take particular offence to this blood libel because I will tell you now that there's not a single Anglo-Saxon in Biden's cabinet. It's full of Jews and people of color. Yeah. So I resent this. I resent this characterization.
Well, yeah, it's kind of. I mean, there's nothing. There hasn't been anything Anglo like this whole idea about like the Anglo-American or the Anglosphere or whatever. It's very much a sort of a leftist thing because America hasn't had an Anglo political structure for like 120 years. Not really.
Yeah. Well, certainly, yeah. I 120 years since the first Roosevelt. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say this: like, there's been a lot of toing and froing between British and American dissident right people over the past week, largely caused by AA spurging out. But this is nonsense. Look, I detest the Truss government, and most of the Americans I like, people like Don the Pleb, etc., also detest, and people like Dave, the distributors, they detest the Biden government. Let us not confuse the real people of our nations with our governments, because most of us detest our governments, and I think that's what's going on here. Like,
Sure, but when AA is talking about that, he's talking about like the elite and the power structure. So when he's saying like America is the enemy, he is talking specifically about the establishment that rules over them.
Exactly, but I mean, most of the Americans who we would call friends all equally detest their government. I mean, do any of us like Liz Truss? I don't think so.
No, but you know.
So again, like we spend so much time on the dissident right, shooting ourselves in the foot, when we should be attacking our real enemies.
Yeah, but the problem with I think what AA is trying to point out is that some people can't see the real enemy. That's the issue.
I don't know, man. I reckon. Look, I watched a really good video a couple of weeks ago by an American ex-Ranger dude whose channel I follow, who explained why the American military recruitment is tanking. And one of the reasons he gave is many ordinary working class Americans don't want to end up fighting their own people, and that's what they think this government wants them to do in the end. And I sent the video to Don the Pleb, and Don the Pleb said to me, "Yeah, that's pretty much 100% true."
I do find it quite shocking to the extent that, I mean, even someone at work said this to me, like an in real life person, to just turn around to me and said that, oh yeah, but you know, Americans can't like beat drones and tanks and fighter jets. And I thought like the ease at which the rhetoric has moved to the point where people are actually openly talking about this stuff is quite shocking, quite worrying.
Yeah, well, look, look, it's not the weapons; it's the people that win wars. To be honest, I don't know if any of you saw that little video I put up in our Discord, where one very determined Russian soldier absolutely fucked off 4 Ukrainians just because he was very determined.
Like, this was a point I used to make, is that you can't really pause an army, because when you turn that army on its own people, it ultimately disintegrates. But
Yeah.
then I was reading about Little Rock 9, and I'm not so sure anymore. Because, you know, they sent those American troops in, literally walking white people down the streets at bayonet point. And
but they were National Guardsmen who in those days were very, very part-time. These days they're a bit different. All right, then these days they can be sent overseas. Back then they couldn't, and they were just following their orders basically. Back then.
Okay,
the world has changed since then, and it really has. People think a lot more now. By the way, Biden isn't English; he's Irish. Says Simple Fire. Biden is a plastic paddy. He's less Irish than I am, and my mother was born in Tipperary, so he definitely is. All right. But yeah, but anyway, this went exactly as I knew it would go. So there you go. All of the stuff I really wanted to talk about got subsumed by going on about anti-colonialism and the Soviet Union. But I knew that would happen. But people think they're cleverer than me, and they say, no, it won't. All right. So there you go.
Well, I actually never said that.
And I'm not here to just toe your line. I know that there's certain things.
Mate,
that
you're
you wanna
never
talk about.
you and Alan founded this channel and the Discord that it's based on with me. So I am always very happy to hear from both of you. And I will always try my best to let you guys do anything you want to do. But I did know that this would go exactly this way, and this went exactly this way. We've just wasted an hour, mostly helping our enemies.
Yep.
In my humble opinion.
I don't see how that's true.
I think you're wrong again.
All right, fine. Look, you are the bloke, Richard, who tells me how stupid most ordinary people are. But fine, you may be right. You may be right.
I'm just saying that I don't think this channel is going to go anywhere if it's just this, like, you're making everybody toe the line. Oh, I only want to talk about this. So
Mate, I
we're
never
gonna talk
do
about.
that. What's the first thing I do? And I'm about to do it on this stream. What is the first thing I do on every single stream I do?
Yeah. You ask people what they want to, and that's true. And I'm jesting you to some point, but I just don't see why you need to sort of rub it in people's faces. Well, I knew how it was going to go. This is a free-flowing discussion, dude. I mean, come on, man.
But I did know how. Richard, all I'm trying to point out is I knew it would go this way. That's what I'm saying.
I don't even see how it's gone the way you said it was.
Look, if I was an enemy of us, okay,
you wouldn't be watching this.
Well, probably not, but that some of them probably do.
If
I did, I would use this against us heavily. I really would.
In what way, though? Like how?
Oh, Chinese Communist Party, Russian Communist Party, obvious lies, stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean, no one's going to be whiter than white. I mean, even our own side is going to, shall we say, bend the truth, push the boundaries, and
I would bend the truth totally, but I don't care. I just want our side to win. I don't care how we win.
Yeah, but Duke, we're anonymous people on a stream. We're not actually.
Yeah, but you're
anything.
not anonymous, Richard. You know.
Yeah, I'm not anonymous. That is true.
Right. Okay. Well, look, we've spent enough time on this, but it went exactly the way I thought it would go. Can we just, before we move on to Northern Ireland, which is going to be the second half of that stream, what do we think about this? I think really excellent Italian woman in Italy.
Milk toast.
Well, yeah, for sure. But compared to Liz Truss, no.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, she's a lot cuter than Liz Truss, apart from anything else. But that's not very hard.
She's got your vote.
Well, but when she was younger, she would have had my vote for absolutely. But she's got my vote on what she says. You know, she calls out bullshit when she sees it, which is good. I've seen various people on the right, including AA, surprisingly enough, and of course D, who detests women, surprisingly, since he's so gay. Really slagging her off, and I don't think that's good.
I don't know if you caught unpopular opinions yesterday, Duke.
I did eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, she was disgusting. Dee was very blackpilling and pointed out that she is affiliated with one of these organizations that's under the umbrella of Gates, that he funds. And look, she is what she is, and you've got to take the good parts. And I agree with a great deal of what she says. And we have discussed him on the Discord, and I do find him quite blackpilling because I think it's quite easy to take that point of view when you have no stake in the future. And I think we have to seize on what positivity we can find, because it is bleak. And she is.
You're not suggesting, Lady of Charlotte, dear lady, that D, who is a gay man, has no stake in the future, sure.
No.
He spent his entire life sticking dicks up bums.
Yeah.
Or having, I don't know which, one or the other.
I know. Yeah, because he got into a bit of an argument with, or a heated discussion with Furious Pertinax.
Yes, he did. Yes, I watched that,
Mm.
and I sided entirely with Aussie Furious
Yeah,
Pertinax.
absolutely.
He was correct on that
Yeah.
argument. He absolutely was, and I actually think he went a bit easy on D sometimes.
They all do. They all
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
No, they do. I mean, you know, we've discussed him and the very fact that he's there in the first place. So yeah.
totally right. Totally right. Brian Borrow, she quotes Chesterton. Do you know what? There's an excellent Chris Gard song from Chesterton about cider. Go and check that out, Brian Borrow.
On topic of Italy, I've seen some stats where it's something like, but I think it's something like in terms of births and versus deaths, it was like 300,000 people, like 300,000 people more died last year than were born last year in Italy. So demographics look set to not look good for Italy.
Is that going on abortions, Mitch?
No, just like births versus deaths in general.
Oh, okay. But then,
But to be honest, when you
how
go
many?
around-
Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, to be honest, there's a lot of Italian towns where you walk around and you just don't see many kids at all.
The same goes to Greece. Like you see islands where it's just like one kid at a school and that's it.
Wow.
It's just like a massive thing is mass immigration won't replenish like the likes of Spain, Portugal, Greece, and Italy that much because the economies aren't as they don't have a good reputation like the Germans, the Swedes, and Brits do. So
But this is why I'm so bullish on the Med, because basically, the local native populations might be declining, but they appear to me to be relatively unscathed from mass migration. I mean, I just returned from a trip to Sicily, and I mean, there was a lot of old people there, like a hell of a lot of old people, but I didn't really see much diversity. If I'm being honest with you, it was very white. I was really quite surprised.
yeah, you go to the Canary Islands, which are like they're probably like the blackest part of Spain, but even then, it doesn't look too different from like what you see in the mainland in Spain in terms of demographics. Like you don't see much mass immigration of like Moroccans there or anything.
Yeah, there's probably more British people there than there are Africans.
Gus in Lanzarote.
Yeah, dirty weekend in Lanzarote, lads.
I mean, I
Nothing
came
wrong
back
with
from
that.
Wales earlier in the week, and to be honest, that's the whitest place I've been to for a long time since I last went to Italy.
How's your ankle, by the way, Ammon?
Oh yeah, it's better now. It's good.
Cool, man. Ammon was going up this very high, dramatic mountain when he was in Wales. So,
Oh no,
Hey,
painful.
what about me, Duke? I broke my collarbone, and you've not asked me about my collarbone. It's terrible.
go on, mate.
Yeah, how's that?
How's your collarbone?
It's good. Thanks for asking. It's good.
I mean, is it out of a sling yet?
It's out of the sling at the moment. Yeah.
Cool, man. Always happy to hear it. Look, I did that when I was playing rugby when I was a teenager, but it heals pretty quick.
Anyway, where were we? Kind of got lost in the moment there.
Well, look, I'm just asking for the panel's opinion on this Italian girl. I reckon is
Maloney. Well, it's too early, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but relative to the likes of the race mixing, dimwit, Remainer, anti-monarchist, liberal slut Truss, she's great.
I mean, to be honest, I thought I would at least enjoy the press overreaction, but I'll be honest, I'm not even really enjoying that anymore.
Oh yeah, she's the new Mussolini, apparently.
Yeah, but it's just like it's so predictable now. Like,
Yeah.
there's no fun in it at all. You kind of waiting to see which way they sort of twist it, and it's just okay, mustache man or bald mustache man, you know.
I think the news of the election kind of got buried by what's happened with the economy sort of going down a shitter with like sterling going down the pan, and then what happened with Nord Stream. So in many ways, it's kind of good for her because all that attention that would have been on her for being quote unquote far right has basically been put down the memory hole because it's been sort of overshadowed by other events. So in many ways, it's actually a good thing from their perspective.
Do we think, Richard, that all of this Nord Stream stuff, the Ukraine stuff, and the basic deindustrialization of Europe, including Germany, which is being pushed not just because of the Ukraine and Russia stuff, but because of the watermelon green agenda, etc. Do we all think that in the short to medium term,
yeah, I've also heard on the topic of Italy that Meloni's pretty neoliberal on the economics, so I don't think much will change for the Italians on that one. Because the thing about Italy is they're not got the same, like, they're not as positive as some culture. So you have Italians, like the younger ones, who, you know, if they had houses and a decent job, they'd be having like big families, I reckon.
Yeah.
But the problem is the economy is so bad that it's the same. The same goes for Portuguese and the Spaniards and the Greeks as well. The Meds are generally like wanting big families, but the economy is just so bad they can't get it.
Oh, there's so many adult children living with their parents in Italy. How the hell are you going to start a family when you're living with your mum and dad?
That's pretty much the same problem here as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not like bashing the woman. It is too early to tell. We just have to wait and see. I don't know if this is maybe just an English perspective, but I kind of think that any elected politician is just not going to be able to get anything done in any sort of rightward trajectory anyway, because all of these states are silted up with giant bureaucracies. So
yeah, it's not just that. I mean, Italians aren't exactly enough having stable governments. So is Meloni even going to be in charge 6 months from now or 12 months from now, given that her and you got Berlusconi, who's like the more experienced one. Yeah, I mean, you got Berlusconi is quite experienced, and I think he's a funny guy. You got what's his name? Salvini, who him and Meloni have fallen out in the past, so I don't know how the dynamic between them two will go along. Because of course, like Salvini, he gambled a couple of years back and crashed the government he was part of because he thought he could get an election and win, but then he just massively buggered up for him, and Meloni just took all the votes that he gained from the other right-wing parties that he himself got votes from. So I don't know how Meloni and Salvini will work together. I think like Berlusconi will be the main decisive element in the government. To be honest, he's more experienced and he knows how the EU operates.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about Berlusconi when he was in. What was his? I mean, it was riddled with scandal. He's
yeah,
just a bit.
Yeah,
he's a political operator.
Yeah, there's a comment by him where he says, the Italians don't like immigration, but all the attractive women can stay.
And that's Berlusconi in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'd probably do that too, to be honest with you, and that's like fairly traditional.
Yeah, he's a very cheeky fellow. That's all I will say about him.
I mean, he's getting on a bit now too. I mean, he's had a lot of plastic surgery and things, but I suspect his health maybe isn't as good. But behind the fake tan, he's maybe not as well as you might think.
Yeah, I was going to say, when he was standing up on that stage with them, I thought they got like a wax model up.
Yes,
they were still standing with.
Let that be a lesson to everyone. Yeah, he's had far too much surgery.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, Italians are like any girl who's ever been to Italy, like you're gonna get your bum pinched in Italy.
Absolutely.
If you're cute, So in a way, it's compliment.
I mean, if that's what Italian men are like, they're pretty safe compared to Turkish men. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I reckon, like, in the Western world these days, we try and say, like, a woman getting catcalled is bad, you know, or wolf whistle. Whereas actually, in my experience, most girls don't mind that because it like says to them they're attractive, and that's all it is. It's nothing else. But in Italy, you'll get your bum pinched. I mean, that isn't being raped. That is not being raped.
Yeah. Whereas with Turks, it's let's say you got a woman in a bikini on the beach. They'll just take photos of said girl without her permission. That's why.
There is a nightclub in Australia now, I think in Melbourne, for God's sake, where if you stare at a woman, you'll get chucked out.
That's right. They have staff in the nightclub to check your behaviour, check your staring. Yeah.
If a if a woman stares at a bloke, that's no problem, of course, because it's about equality, not pro-feminism. But if a man stares at a woman, he'll get chucked out now. And like one of the things you have to do, as everyone who's a normal human being understands, in order to like form a relationship, is you have to have eye contact. It's kind of impossible to do it without that, really. But whatever. But yeah, I mean, look, all I think about this Italian lady is that, like, if only like Liz Truss was half as good as she is, rather than the vile thing that Truss actually is. That's my main opinion on it, to be honest.
Well, should we segue into the economy talk then?
Yeah, all right. We can talk about the economy for a little bit, and then we're going to get onto our Northern Ireland subject.
Yeah.
So, all right, the British economy is imploding, as is all of the European economies, and it's being done on purpose. That's my own opinion.
Did anyone here see the Farage, little short Farage video that he did on the economy?
Is that the one he did in Australia?
Yes.
Yeah, because he was in Melbourne. A couple of people I know went to hear him speak on Monday. I think he's in Sydney this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, the video, he was standing next to the Gordon of Khartoum statue, I believe, in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, it's a funny coincidence. But so and in that he mentioned that like the tax cuts were actually probably less risky as an economic strategy than the green policy, but only one is sort of slated for sinking the economy and not the other. But of course, most of this damage was done much earlier, which is what no one seems to want to say.
The tax cuts will make hardly any difference one way or the other, in my opinion. But like Richard is more up on this stuff than I am, so yeah.
Oh, definitely. But it was a gift to Labour. Oh, I mean, everybody loves bankers getting their bonuses, and it's just a gift to Labour. And I've read some polls where they're saying Labour's, which I don't believe. They say Labour's 30 points ahead. It's 17 points ahead. I mean, who believes polls anyway? But
they're ahead, though. But they're ahead. For sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
But just because, like, most people didn't want Boris sacked.
Yeah.
I was not an Alexander Johnson fan, as everyone here knows, but most people didn't want him sacked, and Truss isn't popular, and what a surprise, really. I mean, look at her cabinet, which like doesn't have a single straight white man in it, for example. So conservative.
I mean, I am surprised that Starmer isn't making more noise for an election. Not that I care either way. I'm never voting again, but
I reckon his best bet is to shut his mouth totally, which is what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, it's all kind of obviously superficial bullshit, because when they were printing all this money over the last 2 years that led up to this in the first place, every opposition party were just saying you're not doing this hard enough. So the idea now that they all reckon there should have been some big course correction. Well, they don't actually, because they don't even talk about what's happened over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, totally agree. I can't disagree with you at all. Richard, you're the economics dude on this panel. What do you think about this?
I think it's just the context in which this has all happened. So there's there's a couple of events that need to be put into context. One, which is the disaster that was the pandemic, and the explosion of debt that caused with the furlough scheme, the disaster of track and trace, just the accumulation of huge amounts of debt with a bunch of people sitting in their asses doing absolutely no work. And then we run into this energy crisis, which has been completely of our own making with these ridiculous policies of ESG-backed policies and so on and so forth. And then the government's response to that, which was to say, well, we're going to underwrite the cost of the energy crisis. We're going to cap bills. We're not actually going to have any mechanism in place to actually reduce demand. We're just going to cap prices and pay what the inflated market prices are because of the squeeze on LNG. And then on top of that, you've got this bug-eyed moron chancellor, this minority shoo-in, with his cutting taxes at a time when there's a fiscal crisis. So, I mean, I was actually very disappointed that Farage said that this is the best budget since 1986. Awful.
Yeah.
And it's really funny, actually, because there had a cycle over the past, 50, 70 years where what happens is Labour fuck up the economy, the Tories fix it, Labour gain power, they fuck up the economy again. But actually, that cycle's now reversing. It's the Tories that are screwing everything up. And the next election, Labour are going to be faced with a real pickle because they're not going to be able to do any spending because the Tories have already done it. So from my point of view, it's just been a disaster. And the UK just continues to go from weakness to weakness. I mean, it's to me, it's looking like a sort of second world country at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember a time it's ever been so bad. When I talk to my family in the UK, they just, I mean, the 1st of October, the energy caps ended and the bills will have gone up again. How the hell are people going to get through the winter?
Well, they're going to be okay now with
fine for now.
With the cap, but what is the sort of just what does the standard of living look like in the UK going forward?
Yeah,
I mean, when I go back, you hit the airport and it's like the first thing I think is, where the fuck am I? Am I in England or Somalia? And then you step out of the airport and there's potholes everywhere. Like nothing works. The NHS is falling apart. It's just a shambles.
I'm going back to the UK for a month next year, and I feel quite daunted by the prospect because I know I'm not going to like what I see. But it's home. But yeah, it's dreadfully dispiriting.
Yeah, look, I totally agree, Lady Charlotte. Like last time I went back to UK, I made the mistake of going back to the bit of London where I was born. And,
oh God.
I felt like a stranger there, totally. Like there were hardly any white people at all. So yeah, totally agree with you. Yeah, I don't know, man. Look, I miss England sometimes. I miss Britain sometimes, more accurately. Because like I've lived in Scotland, I've been a while, been in Northern Ireland with the British Army, by the way. But yeah, I miss Britain sometimes, but I miss the countryside and the little villages and the historic buildings and the standing in a pub on a Saturday afternoon, talking to people. I miss that kind of stuff. I'm watching a rugby union match or a cricket match or something like that, and all of that has just been destroyed.
Well, it's kind of weird how zoned the country is, right? Because like the village down the road from me still has like an old cricket ground, and I'll go down there and watch the cricket sometimes on the weekend, and I'll walk around my local area like hiking about, and it just looks the way it's supposed to. But then like obviously like last week I went away, and I drove past like Birmingham and Wolverhampton. and places like that. And it's just you go into these zones, right, into these areas, and it's like Mega City 1 from Dread, and then you go out the other side and you're like 2 miles down the road and it's just back to sort of leafy countryside and the way it should be.
But in the middle of like London or Birmingham or one of these big, or even Glasgow to some degree these days in British cities, it's almost like you're watching like what's that bloody movie from the 90s? It's almost like you're watching Blade Runner,
Yeah.
But like there's no real people from that city, they're just from everywhere.
I know what you mean. So I was back in the UK this year in March, and I was in Reading town centre, and I shit you not, I was looking around at the people, and I thought, 80% of these people don't even look human. It was bizarre. It was like they're from another world. It was just something else, man. It was something else.
They are from
a melting
another
pot
world.
of everything you can possibly imagine.
But not melting at all, actually, all being not melting. Because that's what diversity is. There's no melting. It's
I don't
not
know.
about...
I don't know. I was seeing some creatures that looked like they've been pretty melted, if you ask me.
All right, you might have seen some. Fair enough, Richard. But look, basically, diversity is about not melt. No, it's not about absorbing these people. It's about these people taking over your own culture. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if anyone saw that.
Sometimes I get a bit.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I think this delay that we've got. Very quickly, sometimes I sort of get a bit too sort of enthusiastic about my sort of my hatred of what's happening, but for me, it's just I feel completely helpless to the extent where I thought I actually can't live in the country anymore because I just felt so out of place and uncomfortable that I had to go somewhere else. It's very hard for me to explain that actually.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but like I went overseas. Like I went to South Africa after I left the British Army, and that was more for adventure than anything else, to be honest with you, in my case.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone saw this this stunt that the Save Our Statues guys did, where they went up to the 4th plinth in Trafalgar and they stuck a little plaque over the top of the plaque that's on it, where they put the story of that black guy who butchered all those people in Malawi, all the sort of settlers in Malawi.
Lovely.
And it's kind of funny as well because there's a picture there where it shows like a picture of like where they've obviously stepped back and waited, and there's people there reading it, and they're all like white people reading the plaque on this 4th plinth. So it's like in this sort of sea of crap that is London, like in that little bit in the middle, it's like a little white enclave, but it's still ruled over by the mullahs of like wider London.
Yeah, it's also ruled over by people like Liz Truss, who is a race mixer. She's a liberal Democrat, I think, originally.
She was
just to interrupt.
Yeah, she was a Ramona. She's also an anti-monarchist, and she's basically like a liberal shithole. And that's the best I can describe her. I'm sorry. And yeah, I know conservatives who said, "Oh, let's hope Liz Truss wins." And I even wanted Liz Truss to win, just so it wasn't someone who was not even white.
I'm sure you just allude to the fact that she was in an interracial marriage. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
Well, if you did, then yeah. But I also think she have an affair with Kwasi Kwarteng.
Yeah, they had some kind of I don't know if it was, you could call it an affair, but a meeting.
No,
a meeting of minds.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah.
Twice, I think, is if the tabloids are to be believed. Yeah,
And somehow stayed married to her husband.
Yeah,
who
he took it back. Yeah,
who must be a total cuck. I'm sorry. The most vile
the
form.
literal usage of the word.
Yeah, the most vile form of a male is a cuck. Not if she does it and you don't know about it, but if she does it, you know about it, and you still stay with her, you're done, mate.
well, he's a house husband who brings up the daughters. While she concentrates on her. I mean, she thinks she's like Mrs. Thatcher. If you remember, Dennis Thatcher always took a back seat to the Iron Lady, but that was a completely different situation.
I'm sorry, Lady Charlotte, I just threw up a bit in my mouth.
Oh dear, I know.
Because, like, as far as I
Understandable.
understand, Mr. and Mrs. Thatcher were like a pre-traditional couple.
Very.
I don't think Mrs. Thatcher played the field.
Nope. No. She chose
Especially not as a
wisely when she
mudshot.
chose her husband. Yeah.
All right. Well, we were supposed to be talking about Northern Ireland half an hour ago, so let's move on to Northern Ireland, guys. Look, we are in a sick society. We are in a totally sick society, and the bit we were just talking about with that some vile bint trust goes back to the first bit we were talking about with Putin, in my opinion. Where we will tell you how great communism used to be. I'm sorry, like, I don't want to do this on my channel. But yeah, all right. Let's go on to Northern Ireland, which is the second part of our subject. Whose dog is that? That sounded like a dog.
Yeah, it's my dog. I don't.
Oh, dogs are good, man. What sort of dog you got?
It's probably my German Shepherd having to go up my Swiss Shepherd for like going in food.
Lovely. Oh, dog. I like all dogs and a fair number of human beings. So there we go. But yeah, all right. Let's move on to Northern Ireland. And let's start with Lady Charlotte. What's your opinion of what's going on in Northern Ireland today with this obviously fucked up agreement that the UK came to with the EU about Northern Ireland, which I've never worked out because, like, the Northern Ireland is part of the UK. So UK leaves the EU, so does Northern Ireland.
I mean, this agreement, half the people in Northern Ireland don't understand it. I mean, Northern Ireland's really at a crossroads now. There's two issues. The first one is, as you know, there was a census in the UK in 2021. And the big news in that was that the Protestant population is now in a minority. They're 43.48% of the population. The Catholic population is now 45.7%. The second development was earlier this year, Sinn Féin became the biggest party in the Northern Ireland government. And they're pushing for, suddenly the United Ireland discussion has come on the table again. And the people are pushing for that also pick upon the Northern Ireland Protocol. And they hated Brexit. They never wanted that in the first place. It's really interesting. There's actually, this is quite a timely time for this stream. There's a conference in Dublin going on right now called Future Ireland. And they're bringing together various people to talk about how, let me just get the quote here because the language is just, this group, Ireland's Future, just after the census results, a campaign group was set up by whom? Your guess is as good as mine, Duke, who set this up, Ireland's Future, and they want to campaign and advocate for, promote, debate, and discuss Ireland's future, including the viability of new constitutional arrangements on the island. So they're already talking about it. Sinn Féin want a referendum on United Ireland within the next 5 years. As far as I can gather, there are no unionist parties at this meeting in Dublin. The Alliance Party was invited, and all credit to them. They felt it wasn't appropriate for them to attend. Good for them, and they've had a lot of stick from some of the nationalist parties, but they're all talking about it in Dublin. It's Ulster's at a crossroads, definitely. And this damn protocol thing that you referred to, it's going to be used as an issue that, well, we can't sort this out, and, well, we should really be in the United Ireland anyway.
Yeah, Lady Charlotte, I don't disagree with anything you said there.
Mm.
I mean, just to remind people, like, more British soldiers died defending Northern Ireland. Vastly more British soldiers died defending Northern Ireland than died in the Falklands War, or even in the Afghan and Iraq wars. It was close to 1,000, and then on top of that, there was loads of Ulster police and loads of Northern Ireland civilians who were also killed by the Provisional IRA, who were Marxists. And Sinn Féin is the so-called political wing of the Provisional IRA, and those guys are totally in favour of Brits out, Somalians in. They basically just want to destroy Ireland as a whole by importing as many black and brown people as they possibly can. They're also totally in favour of feminism. They're totally in favour of LGBTQ stuff. This is what the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin really stand for. I mean, am I wrong, Lady Ashraw? I don't think so.
Not at all. No. I mean,
That's what I don't really get though. Like, back in the day, I mean, obviously anyone doing anything without our say so is gay. But like, if you read through any of the old sort of IRA types, you kind of got the sense that they were pretty, actually kind of hardcore traditionalists when you cut through it. You know, that they were often, there were quite a few ardent Catholics in there. And of course there was a bit of the sort of bleeding heart gay communism stuff that came through later, but now it's just completely the other way. You know, it's complete degeneracy.
Adam, and I've just got to say this to you, mate. Don't confuse the Provisional IRA.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And Sinn Féin for the original IRA. Those guys totally fell out.
Mm.
And they fell out very early on.
The original IRA signed up to a peace agreement, or a ceasefire, in around 71. But there was a group that in the IRA that didn't agree with that. And of course, then that became the Provisional IRA, and then they became the dominant force from there on in. Right. And they saw the traditional IRA as the past, and you know, they had all kinds of terms for them. And the Provisional IRA were much more political. They were Marxist, radical, very, very socialist, not so focused on the Catholic Church. The old IRA
absolutely. And like the original IRA, Adam, were actually a bit fashy. Like the original IRA were a bit fashy. The Provisional IRA were totally Marxist.
Yeah.
Right, but even the early Provisional IRA, I mean, you say they're a lot less Catholic, but they still had some Catholicism in them. It seems that most modern Sinn Féin politicians,
mostly as a con, mate. I did 2 tours there, and that was mostly a con. That was to get young kids to like do stuff they wanted them to do. Like, listen, you've got to remember the Provisional IRA was totally separate from the original IRA. The original IRA, as Lady Ashlock correctly said, like, was totally different. They were nationalist Irish people, and they were a bit fashy actually back in the day. The Provisional IRA were Marxists and communists, and also some of them were outright gangsters. You know, they were making money out of controlling cabs in various Catholic areas. Don't get me wrong.
Markets,
There was loads of like gangsterism going on there, but the leaders of the Provisional IRA, people like oh my God, what are their names now? I'm trying to remember. The bloke who Mrs. Thatcher banned from.
Oh, Jerry Adams.
Yeah, Jerry Adams.
Yeah,
and by the way, Jerry Adams his life was once saved by a parachute regiment soldier who found him after the loyalists had tried to kill him. Now, me, if I'd have found him, he was lucky, because if I'd have found him as a British soldier back then, I would have kicked his head so far hard as to break his neck. But this particular parachute soldier didn't do that, sadly. And the other dude, oh, fuck, I hate him. Martin
McGuinness. He was first.
Martin
he was
McGuinness.
the, second minister when Paisley.
Yeah.
Ian Paisley was first minister. Yeah.
Martin McGuinness, a murdering bastard.
Yeah.
Who should have been hung, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm no room for these people. And what they now want for Ireland is they want it to be totally taken over by immigrants,
yes,
and LGBTQ people and feminists. That's what they now want for Ireland. All of Ireland, not just Northern Ireland. They want that to happen to Southern Ireland too. That's what they support.
Completely, because they'll always bring up the old issue of demographics and how Ireland needs more people, therefore Ulster needs more people. I mean, the ethnic minority population of Ulster between 2001 and 2011, it doubled, and it's doubled again from 2011 to 2021. So that's doubling each 10 years. I mean, it's still a massively white place. I mean, anyone from England will go over there and find it a very, very white place compared to the English mainland. But it's changing, and the society is becoming more secularized. And it was interesting when I read the results of the census, how many Northern Irish people now say that they have no religion. That would have been unheard of when I was growing up, because everybody went to church and you were either one religion or you were the other. But you've got this big group now. So 17.4% of people in Northern Ireland now claim to have no religion. Wow.
Well, that's an advance. If you're a satanic scumbag, I suppose it's an advance. But it is what Western Globo Homo wants, after all.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, the situation in the South in Era is just dire, and they will always argue that the South is relatively depopulated. In the 1840s, the population in the South was as high as 6.5 million, approximately. And then, of course, you had the potato famine. So you've got roughly a third of the population died and a third left. And that Ireland has been, that the globalists would argue that Ireland has been depopulated ever since. There were some population booms, I think in the 70s, and certainly in the days of the Celtic Tiger in the 2000s, there was a population boom in the South. But, the Irish government now are quite happy just to import Africans. And
hasn't Ireland had two Taoiseachs?
Two Taoiseachs, yeah.
Yeah, two Taoiseachs in a row, which is the Irish Prime Minister, for anyone who doesn't know. Haven't they had two gay ones in a row?
Yeah. Leo Varadkar, who was the Taoiseach until 2020. He's Indian and gay. His parents were Indian immigrants. And then Michael Martin is, they're the new Irish.
I don't see like De Valera and people like this really regarding these people as good.
No. The rebels of 1916, the Padraig Pearses, must be spinning in their grave when they see that this was not their vision. This was not their vision for Era, but that's what they've got.
Yeah,
and there's a
like I said, those guys in 1916 who had mostly German arms, by the way, provided by the Imperial German Army. Those guys, and in the 20s and 30s, they became fairly fashy, which is why, that's why, like Ireland in World War II was neutral, but was certainly not anti-German.
Not at all.
For those people on the right, incidentally, who are watching this, like Ireland in the World War II was not particularly neutral. Although I will say this, almost a third of the Irish Defence Force in 1939 deserted, went north and joined the British Army just because they wanted to get in a fight. Because the Irish don't mind a fight,
Yeah, I've also heard. I don't know if you're familiar with. Is it? How do you pronounce it when it's like Owen Duffy or whatever his name is.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he because there's a lot of like fascist IRA types who went over to Spain to fight on Franco's side in the
Yeah,
Spanish
that's
Civil
right.
War.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
According to a book I read on it anyway, they weren't very long, but yeah, it just shows like a lot of IRA guys back then before the provost took it. Yeah, they'd be more in tune with like traditionalist / fascist sort of stuff.
Yeah, they were nationalists. They
Yeah.
put nationalists in the sense that they wanted a strong nation. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, Mitch, a lot of the IRA in World War II did stuff to help the Germans, the mid-century Germans. They did. Like, I'm not going to do what some people do and slag all Irish people off, because, like I said, about a third of the Irish Defence Force actually joined the British forces in 1979. They deserted. They went north. They joined the British forces. And it took them decades to get their Irish pension rights back. Although they did eventually, but like not for a very long time. So I'm not making any generalizations about Irish people. There are good Irish people. There are bad Irish people, just like there are good and bad British and American people. But the original IRA was pretty fashy. It was. But the provisional IRA is totally corporate globalist, pro-mass immigration, pro-LGBTQ, and pro-feminism. And you'll get people like Martin McGuinness, etc., standing there with signs saying refugees welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, so the place is at a crossroads, I guess. And but Duke, it was always heading that way demographically, because Catholics tended to have more children than Protestants. Protestants sometimes left to go to university to go seek work on the mainland. But it's come to a head now with these census results, and unfortunately,
I just think it's a little strange, Lady of Shalott, in that given that they got rid of all the stuff on abortions, basically, in Ireland.
Yeah.
That makes it a little bit strange to me in some ways as to why Catholics are going to have more children. Don't work that one out, really.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, the abortion, that was a real shocker, the abortion vote in the South in 2018. 66.4% of Irish voted for abortion, 33.6% voted against it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I was actually in Ireland at the time of the referendum, and it was horrible. Busloads of women cheering for the murder of the unborn child. When I grew up in Northern Ireland, abortion was not available anywhere on the island of Ireland, anywhere at all. So it's just it's still very hard for me to get my head around what's happened. I mean, the South went first, and then of course eventually Ulster followed suit. I mean, you can get an abortion in Ireland, not in Northern Ireland now, from October 2019. That was legal.
Yeah, but that was imposed on Ulster by Westminster, right?
Yeah, the EU was always trying to meddle in it as well, because the European Court always tried to overrule any opposition, because most people in Ulster didn't want it, but the European Union always tried to sort of parachute it in. So it went backwards and forwards, and you had certain MPs, Liz Truss being one of them, Stella Creasy, a Labour MP, who were really vocal on the fact that women in Northern Ireland couldn't get an abortion, yet they contributed to the NHS and they had to travel to... It was a well-worn path. If you got in trouble, you got on a boat and went to Liverpool. That was a very standard thing. So it went back and forth for some time. Yeah. But now it's pretty much in line with the mainland UK now.
Brian Borrow in the chat says, Martin McGuinness is dead. Good.
Yeah, he is. He did. He died a few years ago.
I'm happy to hear that, because I hated that bastard. But yeah,
He shook the Queen's hand, and the Queen shook his hand.
yeah. I guess she had to, I suppose.
Mm.
Brian Borrow also includes. They say they included Poles and Filipinos in Catholic numbers.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm sure they did. I'm
Yeah,
sure they did. I'm
interesting.
sure they did that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
I mean, they would have included every single person who said they were Catholic, for sure.
Yeah.
And many of them would not be Anglo-Celts, who are the people who should be living in Ireland. You know?
Mm.
I find the situation really interesting because although technically on paper, okay, yeah, it's more Catholic than it is Protestant now, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a vote for becoming a part of the Republic.
I agree. I agree totally. That's a very separate issue because I looked at the figures, just sorry to interrupt, but the figures on identity, your national identity, because that's a different thing to your religion. What do you identify yourself as? And 31.9% identified as British only. 29.1% said they were Irish only. 19.8% said they were Northern Irish only. And 8% said they were British and Northern Irish. So that's complicated when you get down into the figures. What do you identify yourself as? Yeah, and that will determine how you will vote. Yeah.
But that seems to indicate essentially staying with the status quo. And actually,
yeah.
I think staying with the status quo actually benefits both sides. It benefits Catholics and Protestants because for what makes me laugh about the idea of unifying with the South is that it's going to be more gay than it is now. But the interesting thing about Ulster is that it's actually relatively more based than any region of the UK on a relative basis. So actually the status quo works for everybody. Because if you're it's kind of crazy to conceptualize it in this way, but if you're a nationalist living in Northern Ireland, kind of what I would kind of be thinking very hard about whether I actually wanted to become a part of the South, given the way that it's going.
Oh, completely. I mean, this whole Ireland's Future event that's taking place in Dublin this week, this is all top down. This whole talk about referendums and United Irelands, and this is all top down. I mean, my family don't hear anybody saying, yeah, it's be a great idea, let's just unify Ireland. This is coming from the top. I mean, as it ever does, doesn't it?
But that's also interesting because I kind of get the impression that, when push comes to shove, is the Republic actually going to take on the financial burden that is Northern Ireland? And I don't think they are. So it seems like all bluster to me. Yeah. It's a load of bluster.
I mean, do they really want to take on a hardcore of really angry unionists who probably still have access to weapons? Who don't want to be there?
Exactly.
Do they really want to? I mean, you don't have to scratch the surface in Ulster very hard to find the old tensions. There's still plenty of people alive who can remember that time.
Well, a lady ashore, look, even on my little Discord, which has got less than 50 people on it, you are, I think, the only Ulster lady on the Discord. You're the only lady on the Discord, I believe. But we have at least 4 loyalist Southern Irishmen on our Discord.
Yeah.
So, it's not as simple as people think it is.
That's it. It's complicated. It always was.
it always makes me laugh. It always makes me laugh to find out that there are loyalists living in the Republic. It's just blows my mind.
And Richard, at least 2 of them, I believe, have ancestors. Sorry, at least 2 of them have dads who served in the British Army.
Yeah.
Not at all uncommon. Look, my ma was born in Tipperary in Southern Ireland. Now, all right, her dad was a Welshman who served in the RAF in World War II, but she came from Southern Ireland, and was she an Irish nationalist? No, not really. I mean, if you'd asked her if she liked Ireland, she would have said, yeah, for sure. But like, if you asked her, did she like Britain? Yes, she also liked Britain. You know, I mean, for fuck's sake, she spent most of her life there.
Of course, I mean, I've got family on both sides of the border, so I can see both perspectives. And my family in the south, they support the National Party, which is probably the only party that's against the globalization and is against abortion. But they're, you know, they get hammered constantly by the RTE and the Irish media and called fascist and right wing and racist and all of those things. I mean, more and more Irish people are waking up to what is happening in the south, but it may be too late. Maybe they're not waking up enough. I mean, that they are being replaced.
Well, Brian Borrow in the chat, who I know is an Irish dude, says there are villages in Donegal and Monaghan with Protestant majorities, which I'm sure is true. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it definitely anywhere around the border, most definitely. Yeah.
And look, I have seen increasing numbers of like actual Irish nationalists, not particularly anti-British nationalists, but Irish nationalists, pointing out that, like, why should the Irish people be replaced in their own country? You know, Brits out, Somalians in is not the solution. You know,
it's awful. I mean, there's been a couple of high-profile murders in the south of Ireland that have really shocked people that have been related to cultural enrichment. There was, I think, some immigrant murdered a couple of gay men in a very nasty way. People were genuinely shocked. I mean, you know, this is what happens when you bring people who don't share your values into your country. But that's anyone living in mainland UK knows that.
Yeah. I mean, look, to me, Ireland and Britain today face exactly the same enemies.
I mean, Bram Burrow is just saying in the chat that NGOs are very powerful in Ireland, and he's right. There's these non-government groups that Bono has one called One that imports sub-Saharans to Ireland. I mean, these groups are hugely powerful, and the Irish state seems to be particularly conducive to their activities.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. Look, Adamant, you haven't said much for a while, mate. What's your view on this one?
This is not my wheelhouse at all.
But I presume you're a unionist. Like...
well, yeah. Point out the person who isn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder, like, when, I mean, you say they'll call a referendum in the next 5 years. Do you think they'll leave it as long as possible?
They're seeking one. I mean, the Westminster is under no obligation to grant one. They can just say no.
Yeah, they will give them one, though, because, you know.
You think so?
They're that way inclined, aren't they?
Well,
I think Labour would.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Very possibly.
Well, yeah, they might, because Labour doesn't get any votes for Northern Ireland, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, they've recognised now that giving the Blair thing with Scotland was a huge mistake, because that's how they managed to get governments. But they don't get many votes for Northern Ireland, so Labour will. I agree with that.
Yeah, from what it sounds like to me, it sounds like Ireland's going the same path as Poland is, because it's a bit interesting now. Ireland and Poland are two traditionally Catholic, and they've got like strong nationalism, I suppose. Like Ireland's got Patrick Pearse, and you know, the Irish like Easter Rising and War of Independence and whatnot. Then you've got the Polish, you've got their own history of like nationalism, and they're both getting subverted the same way with the NGOs in their capital cities. And then it stretches out.
But the other similarities between the Republic and Poland is that one, they've got ethnic grievances, and two, they are basically the ultimate bitches of the Americans. I mean, basically, Ireland and Poland are I think the worst countries in Europe for this. That they're just completely
well said, Richard. Well said.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Like Ireland's the only country I can think of where the government is suing the EU so that Google doesn't have to pay taxes in the Republic of Ireland. Yeah. That's just bizarre to my mind.
That's right.
Richard got that totally right. Like the Polish have this deal about the Russians, and the Irish have this deal about the Brits, but they're both being destroyed internally by nothing to do with the Russians or the Brits. And
of course,
they can't see it. They can't see it yet. Actually, let me change that. People like Brian Borrow can, but most people can't.
And of course, the Americans just can't stop meddling. They just can't stop meddling in Ireland. They just, because it's another way to get at the UK. Of course, it's another way to denigrate and head at the United Kingdom.
Look, listen. I will say this, Lady Charlotte. I know British and English people who slag off the Irish, and they'll say, no, you know, the Irish are worse than black people and all the rest of it. And I don't ever go for that, partly because my ma was from Southern Ireland, but also because it's just not true. There are many good Irish people. And like the old Irish regiments of the British Army were some of the best regiments in the British Army.
Are you not all Irishing this argument?
No, I'm not. No, come on now. I mean, you know me better than that, mate. Like, I'm an Englishman, all right? If someone asks me, what are you? I'm an Englishman, and I will be till I draw my last breath. But there are good Irishmen. You know as well as I do. We've got like 3 or 4 in our Discord who are Southern Irishmen who are absolute loyalists. Some of whom actually risk their lives for some of the stuff they do.
Yeah.
You know this is true, all right? And as Brian Borrow says in the chat, regiments like the Connaught Rangers were some of the greatest regiments in the British Army. Dublin Fusiliers, same. But many, many fine old Irish regiments. And what I hope is that eventually Southern Ireland will come to its senses and there can be some sort of trade in terms of like international trade between Southern Ireland and Britain once again, because it really would be quite natural because, you know, the British Isles are offshore British islands. And Ireland actually has a damn sight more in common with Britain than most of Europe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm not at all anti-Irish, and I sometimes get a bit upset when I hear some English dudes coming out with anti-Irish shit. Look, if you turn around and say to me that people like the wee dwarf woman in Scotland is more Irish than Scottish, I'll totally agree with you because that's true. And much of the Scottish National Party support in Scotland is really Irish immigrants. But I think they're deluded Irish immigrants for the most part.
You got to admit, though, there is an IQ. I mean, you can find a subversive character.
There is. I think a academic agent stirred this pot some time ago by posting a statistic that there's something like was it 10 points lower in IQ, but basically people in the south of Ireland have a lower IQ than people in the north, and he was being quite anti-Irish. He got into quite a bit of, as he does. He stirred it up a bit too much and upset quite a few people on Telegram. Yeah,
but and even like, I mean, you can see, you know, sort of very subversive characters within our society, and you look and they've got a surname beginning with Mac or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, you know, we can do this. We can say the same thing about small-hatted people, can't we?
Well, yeah, we do.
And we do. But there's some truth with that. But But at the same time, I don't believe all small hats are bad people. Like there are decent ones as well as bad ones.
Yeah, name them.
Name them. All right. Paul Gottfried for a start.
Yeah, that's right.
Paul Gottfried for a start. Hang on, I'll find you another one if you give me a sec. I've got to remember his name.
Got to think really hard to dig up the second.
No, I just need to remember his name. Carry on talking, gents. I'll find his name.
He's going to fail this test, absolutely.
I'm absolutely not going to fail this test. I know his name. I just got to find him on YouTube. Carry on. Speak.
I'm trying to look at my own bookcase to see if I can see any. It's literally just Paul Gottfried.
But again,
Paul Gottfried is an obvious one, but yeah, there is another dude who he's a mate of oh crikey, what's his name? The English dude who did that stupid court case and lost.
Court case.
On his books, I mean.
Oh, David Irving.
David Irving, yeah, he's a mate of David. He's a mate of David Irving, yeah.
Oh, right.
I'm just about to find his name. Carry on, talk.
I was going to say that the other two, coming back to ethnic grievances, are the wedge that the Americans can exploit, or these are particular sort of historic problems that can set two people on one another, which we kind of need to get over.
Yeah.
Regarding Britain and Ireland at some point.
The Americans.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. Yeah.
Do you mean David Cole, Duke?
David Cole.
Oh,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. David Cole is another dude who I would absolutely suggest people
nice.
follow.
2 out of 14 million. Those are good odds.
Oh, bugger off, mate. You know there are more than them.
Well,
you know there are more than them.
I came across a stat the other week which kind of shocked me.
Von Mises?
There's more pro-Jewish advocacy groups in the United States than there are Jews in the United States Army.
I can well believe that.
I'm shocked.
What were you, Richard? What were you saying earlier about Israel flying aircraft out of Russia?
Oh yeah, that the very patriotic Jewish population of Russia, they're so enthusiastic about serving the motherland that they're getting on flights to Israel as quickly as possible.
Yeah, because they're dual nationals, of course. Yeah, they can get that.
Dual nationals.
Right? Yeah, nice one.
Can I ask, Richard? Do you know, did the same thing happen in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it did. I'm pretty sure I heard early on.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
What, Ukrainian nationals that have fled to Israel? I have no idea.
Yeah, if they had Jewish passports. Look, I'm
the beginning of the war.
I am entirely in favour of dual passports, so long as both of your passports have the same monarch. So, like I got a British and Australian passport, so I don't have the problem because my monarch is the same in any case. So but yeah, that stuff not so good. But I'm not going to go along with this idea that like all small hats are bad, because they're not. There are some good ones, and there are many supposedly white. I don't know.
Well, the chat's brainstorming, and they're up to 5, so it's looking good for that race so far.
Well, this is famous people we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, all right, but I'm sure there are many, but you know, how can I describe them? How many bad Anglo-Celtic people are there? How many bad white people are there? I reckon there's a lot more myself.
Well, yeah, by pure metrics, yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think Bowden points this out as well, that you know, like the white liberal is sort of probably
the ultimate
probably the
evil.
boss.
Yeah, that's the ultimate evil. You know, some middle class white woman who just thinks, "Oh, Black Lives Matter," and blah 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 blah, all sorts of nonsense crap. Those people are like our biggest enemies.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I've met some pretty cool sort of Orthodox Jews, but you're sort of run of the mill cosmopolitan sort of liberal one. Yeah. We need to start thinking about whether we allow these people to have dual citizenship or not.
Yeah, you're right what you're saying there, Alan, because like the Jewish people that generally tend to be the bad ones are the people who don't really have much of a religion.
Yeah, and you start getting the whole like abortion is a religious right for them and stuff, crazy stuff like that coming out.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right, I'd agree with all of that. But I mean, you know, if you're going to really slag off Jews to me, then you got to slag off people like Paul Gottfried and the other chap we were talking, David Cole. Both good guys. I'm sorry, both much better than many supposedly white people.
How about Eric Kaufman? Is that how you pronounce his name? Kaufman?
I don't even know who he is.
Horus reviewed one of his books. It was called The White Shift, I think.
Like I said, I don't know him. You'll have to tell me.
I'll have to post some stuff up. And
Chat is saying, but Bobby Fischer, who was certainly an interesting, he was an interesting Jew with interesting views.
Yeah, we got to be a little bit careful here, chaps.
Yeah, I know.
YouTube is not a free speech platform.
No, it's not.
Susan might get upset, which we are not allowed to do. So we have to.
Well, where's she from? What's her early life?
Yeah, right. We are not going to even say. We will let people assume. Given her surname, we will let people assume, I think. But yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I got no problem with that. What do you think, Lady Short? Do you think Northern Ireland can survive as part of the British Isles? As part of the United Kingdom? I know you'd like it to, but do you think it will?
It's interesting. I mean, an ideal scenario, which will of course not take place, but would be great, would be if the counties in the east, which are Antrim and Down, and that's where the loyalist, unionist, Protestant population is predominantly centred. I mean, could those two counties just secede from the rest? Let the south take the rest of it, and those two counties remain with mainland UK. That would be a dream solution, but I mean, Sinn Féin would never allow that. The globalists would never allow that. The people in charge would never allow that. I hope it could. I don't see why it couldn't. I mean, I agree with Richard. I think that people will hopefully ultimately vote for what's best for them economically, because anyone with half a brain should do that and think about what's best for them. Because we're going into
hang on, Lady Ursula. I got to disagree with one thing you said there.
Oh no.
Sometimes the best thing to vote for is not about economics.
Oh yeah, but I know. Well, I know. I agree. I mean, I would love Northern Ireland. Of course, I would. I grew up in a very loyalist part of Belfast. I would love to see Northern Ireland stay with the Union because I think that's the best place for it in the long term. But I don't get to make those decisions. But I just hope that the people there think about what they would lose and where they would be going, because I really, really worry about the future of the South. I can't think of a country that has changed so dramatically, so quickly. It's unrecognizable. I was last in Era in summer 2019, and I just didn't know the place. It's really shocking. It nearly needs to be seen to be believed.
What amazes me is that I was watching a BBC documentary on Ireland in the 1970s, and quite literally, when you look at the footage, it's like a third world country.
Yeah,
it's like
bombed
out.
Yeah,
they're dirt poor, and
that's right.
Yeah, but the transformation on many levels, demographically, socially, economically, has been like revolutionary within that short 50 years, and it's gone from being very traditional, very conservative, to being one of the gayest countries in Europe.
Yeah, as soon as they signed up to the EU, I remember my grandparents used to joke about there being no roads in Ireland. And there weren't. If you were trying to get to Cork from Cork to another part of Ireland, there might not even be a road for you to use, or it would be a dirt track. There would be, the infrastructure was just non-existent. And then as soon as they signed up to the EU, suddenly there were all these big infrastructure projects, these roads being built. And I remember thinking, what are the EU getting in return for this? And well, now we know what they got. Yeah, they got the country. So it's changed beyond, like, I mean, it really was. I mean, it was like a banana republic. It was a third world place in the 70s, and it was desperately poor. Still very, very rural, agriculturally based economy. I mean, traditionally, all the money in the industry was in the north. It always was. And Belfast was one of the biggest industrial cities in the world at one point. Shipbuilding, engineering, the money was all in the north.
Yeah, I mean, like Northern Ireland had a huge shipbuilding industry and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas most of Ireland, certainly outside Dublin, was pretty rural.
Yeah, very, very.
But I still hope that eventually, like my ideal solution being an Anglo-Celtic nationalist, would be that eventually Ireland would come back to Great Britain, which I think would be better for all our people, to be honest.
I think there's too much water under the bridge for that, mate.
Yeah, I think that
I disagree there, Richard, as I sometimes do disagree with you. You're too much of an economist sometimes, mate.
I'm not talking about the economics of it. I'm talking about
no, I know you're not, but you're
feel.
No, but your views on stuff is too much of an economist, and I think you're wrong about that.
Yeah, but you're just a sort of like a dreamer in the same way that Brutus is. You know, oh yeah, you know.
No,
that's like a dream.
No, I'm nothing like Brutus. I don't share. I mostly disagree with Brutus about almost everything. But anyway, so yeah, you're not right about that, mate. Well, all I'm saying is you look at it from an economist's point of view. And you think everything is about that, as most of you guys do it. And it's not. Most things are not about the economy. This is how you sometimes get things wrong. Most things are not about money.
I'm not looking at the South joining the UK as being an economic question, because arguably they're richer than the UK is anyway. So what do they have to gain from unification?
Well, they're not, but okay, if you say so. Whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. It's too late in the street. Normally speaking, I go around all the guests at the start of the stream and ask if there is something they wanted to bring up as their own subject. And I didn't do that today because we kind of worked out what we were going to do. So I'm going to do that now. If there's something you would like to bring up as your own personal subject, this is your chance. And I'm going to start with Mitch. Mitch, is there anything you would like to bring up as your own first subject?
I could like talk about like Ukraine, but I think we talked about it in the first hour. Apparently, the Brazilian presidential elections tomorrow, between two main opponents, Bolsonaro and Lula, who's he's pretty much like one step away from being a full-blown tanker, from what I've heard of him.
Okay. And is that good, bad, or indifferent, mate?
I mean, Bolsonaro's got I supported Bolsonaro when he was back in 2018 because he was like the Brazilian version of Trump in a way, but he'd also say like really edgy stuff like about the military dictatorship, which I can't repeat here because I don't want to get your channel nuked. But yeah,
fair enough. I remember Bolsonaro, and I remember most people on the right supporting him. I certainly remember that.
Yeah, the thing about so on one hand, you have people who supporting him because I don't know, because a lot of people support him because either because they don't like Lula because his socialist party they want to legalize gay marriage, which in a country like Brazil where the vast majority are Catholic, it won't fly well. Then you got Bolsonaro who. He's a lot more neoliberal in terms of his economics and also he's not as been as radical. I mean, in terms of crime, he's massively brought it down because he liberalised the gun laws. So if you're anti-crime in Brazil, that's good. Corruption-wise, there's been a few scandals with his government. Like he's had ministers drop out either because one minister quoted Goebbels, one minister didn't like what Bolsonaro said about Amazon rainforest or what I don't know about that. Another minister left because he was involved in the corruption scandal. So I don't know what's going to happen in Brazil. Perhaps the left will win again, or perhaps Bolsonaro will win tightly. But he looks like hit and miss from what I've seen. Then there's a bunch of other elections going on in Europe, like in the Czech Republic and Austria, which I don't know how consequential they will be because they'll be decided because they've been affected by sanctions. Like
Mitch, is the so-called right going to win in some of those countries? Do you think?
I know in Slovakia they've got like if you have an election, for argument's sake, next week, the pro-Russian party will win. I know in Austria, you've got a left-wing party like the Social Democrats who they're leading, but there's two right-wing parties: the Conservative Party and the Freiheitspartei Österreich or Freedom Party of Austria, who are more right-wing, like populist, like Giorgia Meloni types. But but the left got into power only because of a scandal. Because those two right-wing parties apparently got into some corruption scandal in Ibiza or something. Yeah. Then you got what was the other place? Oh, Czech Republic, which there've been massive protests apparently over the sanctions. So perhaps, but I don't think much will change in Czech Republic. So I don't bother commenting about Czech Republic.
Didn't Bolsonaro change the law so that people could take out moped gangs? Sort of. It's not defensively. They can literally, like, if they suspect that they're gonna be done over, they can like run them over.
Yeah, I think that's actually true. It was some time ago, if I remember correctly. But yeah,
right.
Because that's the thing, Bolsonaro. Because he celebrates military dictatorship. He's known for being just like full on, like he'll just like pass laws like that. He'll liberalize the gun laws, etc., etc. So I would not put it past him to legalize laws like that. And crime in Brazil is really terrible, especially in like places like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo and Recife.
The big cities, in other words.
Yeah. You get Brazilians who dislike him because they reckon he didn't go radical enough. I'm not really too knowledgeable about that, but I reckon he's just been a massive flop, like Trump.
So does it look, Mitch, that he will win this election or what?
If he does, he'll be tight.
Okay.
I hope he wins, just because the opposition is just like they're complete global homo. Even though, like, the Socialist Party opposes America and sides with Russia, so either way, Brazil will side with Russia geopolitically. However, Lula wants to legalize gay marriage. So if I was a Brazilian, I would just bite the bullet and vote Bolsonaro, even if I didn't like him.
Slippery slope is real. Anyone else got anything to say about the Brazilian politics and so on?
No, I'll
No.
have to head off anyway though, so I'll have to leave you all to it.
All right, hang on. I'm just going to ask you, was there anything you wanted to bring up this week as a particular subject?
I just really want to talk about the pipeline, but we've already gone over it quite well anyway.
A bit, yeah, we did. Mate, you're always welcome on the stream. Along with Richard, you're one of the two founders of Splendid Isolation and the Discord it comes from. So you're always very welcome on the stream.
Yep, no worries. Right, I'll see you all later anyway.
Go on.
Yep, talk to you later.
Cheers, bye.
Lady Charlotte, was there anything else you would like to bring up as your own subject other than the Northern Ireland stuff, or even related to that if you want?
No, not really. I mean, really, thank you so much for asking me on. And it was great that we could talk about this subject on this weekend that this dreadful conference is taking place in Dublin. I mean, it's a top-down event, and it's quite interesting to see how things will play out. It was interesting, the reaction in Ireland to the Queen's death. There were a lot of Irish people who were very touched by her, and there was a lot of genuine condolences, and it seemed to be, the nastiness seemed to come from people whose ancestors left Ireland quite a long time ago. It seemed to be from the plastic paddies, the genuine Irish
people like Biden, etc.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, plastic paddies. And my family saw that King Charles, the new king, visited Belfast a couple of days after his mother's death and was absolutely mobbed by a supportive crowd. And I just thought, I can't think of a politician who would inspire such a reaction in this country or in the UK. I mean,
Cool.
Politicians are genuinely loathed. I can't think of anyone who would, get that kind of cheers. And yeah, interesting. So the monarchy will continue.
Hopefully.
Yep.
I think, Lady Ashore, you'll like our play out tune when we come to it. But anyway,
good.
Listen, I promised it a week ago. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Richard, anything you wanted to bring up that was nothing to do with anything we've talking about so far, or a reinforcement of some we have talked about?
No, not in particular. We've covered such a wide range of topics tonight, but just want to say it's been a real honour to be on this stream with such a wonderful panel, and hopefully we can have many more very interesting discussions in the future.
Well, I hope so. We started, by the way, in December 2020, and the first stream I did, Splendid Isolation, was with Atman and Brutus back then. Shows you how we've changed. But that was Bruce's choice, not mine. Yeah. And the original stars of this channel and the Discord that it comes from were Atman and Richard and myself. So, just so people know. Brian Borrow is saying Irish Twitter is very woke. I can well believe that. But yeah. And Richard, you're always welcome on the stream, just as Atman is, just as Lady of Shalai is, and just as Mitch is. You're my friends as far as I'm concerned, so that's as far as that goes. Anything you wanted to bring up as the last subject, Mitch?
Nah, I've already gone over the Brazilian election and anything basically of consequence in terms of where elections and stuff like that go.
Cool bananas. All right. Well, we're coming up on 2.5 hours, which is probably enough for a stream. Our next stream will be next week, I think. Same time. Splendid Isolation 92. I'm also, if you want next Thursday, if you want to know about a brilliant movie called Master and Commander of the Far Side of the World, which is the best film ever made about Nelson's Royal Navy, check out Flooded Basements channel on YouTube, because I'm going to be a guest on that stream, I believe, and we're going to be going into detail about it. Should be good. So I'm going to play us out of a tune, as I usually do.
I'm a loyal Ulster Orange man, just come across the sea. And for singing and for dancing, sure I hope that I'll please ye. I can sing or dance with any man, as I did in days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was born at every offering in the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on that 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
And when I go to leave yous, all good luck till yous, I'll say. And when I'm on the raging foam, I hope for me you'll pray. I'll be sailing to my native land, to Ulster's rocky shore, where on the 12th I always wear the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was born at every offering and the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on that 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
And whenever I come back again, my brethren for to see, I hope that in good Orange style you all will welcome me. My favourite tune, Boyne Water, will please me more and more, and make my orange heart feel proud of the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was born at every offering and the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
Okay, so that was the sash my father wore, which is a good old orange tune from Northern Ireland. Thank you very much to all my guests, to Richard and to Lady of Shalott and to Mitch, and also to Alan. And we'll see you next week. Please remember to like the stream because it helps. And please also subscribe to the channel. We need 10 more subscribers and we hit the magic 1,000. So please subscribe to the channel. Go well, folks.
Cheers, everyone.